Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Sukkah, pages 25 through 31, Chaf Hey through Lamed Aleph. 25. Tanya. Vayihi anashim asher hayu tmeim lenefesh adam. There were people who were impure, from corpse impurity. This is a pasuk in the Torah, and it is discussing how people were not able to participate in the Pesach Rishon because of their involvement with a dead body. And they wanted an opportunity not to be left out of this national celebration of Pesach. So the question is, who were these people? Who were they? So one opinion is, Noserono shel Yosef hayu. They were those people who were carrying the bones of Joseph, that Yosef HaTzadik, who was the viceroy of Egypt and was buried in Mitzrayim, and had his bones taken out of Egypt on the way to Eretz Yisrael. So those who were handling them, they were Tameh, and they did not want to lose out on the Korban Pesach. Another opinion, Mishael ve'el Tzafan hayu. Shoskim Nadav Avihu. These were Mishael and El Tzafan, who the Torah says were the ones who buried their cousins Nadav and Avihu, who died on the inauguration day of the Mishkan. However, those two opinions are problematic because those people could have purified themselves at an earlier time. In the case of Mishael and El Tzafan, they were touching a dead body on the 1st of Nisan, and it only takes 7 days to purify yourself, so by the 8th of Nisan, they could have been in the clear. And yet this Erev Pesach was the 14th of Nisan, is the day of the Korban Pesach. So a third opinion is, Oskim b'meit mitzvah hayu. They were people who happened to be involved with a meit mitzvah, which is a dead body that no one buries and is lying there on the street, and the first person who comes across it has a solemn obligation to bury the body. And what happened? Chal Shvi Shalahem, the Erev Pesach, the 7th day of their purification rite happened to fall out on Erev Pesach. That day they couldn't do the Korban, but had it been the next day, they would have been able to. Okay. Chavav, 26. Tanu Rabbanan. Shomrei ha'ir bayom patur min ha'sukkah bayom chavim balayla. If you are a guardian of the city, if you're a security guard who works in the daytime, you have to observe the sukkah mitzvah at night. You're exempt in the day while you're working, but you're obligated at night, and vice versa. However, if you're watching the fields and the orchards, you're exempt whether day or night. So the Gemara asks, why doesn't this person guarding the orchard build a sukkah out there in the fields and do his job while also observing the mitzvah of sukkah? So the Gemara gives two different answers as to why this is not required, and there's an exemption here. Abaya says, Teshvu ken taduru. You have to live in the sukkah like you would live in your home, meaning with all the amenities. And in a booth that happens to be out in the fields, for the guardian of the orchards, it's not going to be Teshvu Kein Taduru, you're not going to have your amenities. Therefore, you're exempt. Rava says, Pirza Kor Laganav. A hole calls the thief, meaning the walls of the sukkah will block the view of the security guard from those other sides of the field. And so therefore, we don't want the security guard in an enclosed booth where he won't be able to do his job. We want him in an open area, so he's exempt from sukkah. Chav Zayin, 27. Ne'amar kan chamisha asar, v'ne'amar chamisha asar b'chag hamatzot. There is a famous Gezerah Shava, maybe the most famous Gezerah Shava in the whole Talmud, is the Tedvav min chag hamatzot, 15:15. It says the words chamisha asar, meaning 15, with regard to Sukkot, and it says it with regard to Pesach. And just as on Pesach, the obligation to eat matzah is only absolutely true on the night of the 15th, the first night of Pesach, the night of the Seder, so too the absolute obligation to eat a meal in the Sukkah is only on the night of the 15th of Tishrei. And after that, it is a mitzvah to eat if you're going to eat. It's mitzvah to eat in the Sukkah. But if you refrain from eating bread-based meals, you might have avoided the sukkah the rest of the holiday. So too with matzah. If you didn't want to eat bread, then you didn't have to eat matzah the rest of the way. You could eat potatoes and vegetables. So this idea of a chiyuv, an absolute chiyuv on Pesach and Sukkot, is the Gezerah Shava of Tedvav. 28. Chavchet. Amru alav Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. They said about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that he was a very holy man. He did everything the right way. And he tried to avoid wasting any time away from learning. He never said that the time has come to leave the house of study, except for Erev Pesach and Erev Yom Kippur, Why on those days? Rashi explains, on Erev Pesach, you have to go home to make the Paschal lamb, to prepare the Seder, and make sure that you start on time so that the children do not fall asleep from it being too late. And on Erev Yom Kippur, you have to go home because it's a mitzvah to eat. Since you have to prepare yourself for the fast the next day, you have to go home and eat a nice meal. So therefore, on those 2 days, and only those 2 days of the year, would Yochanan ben Zakkai say, it's good to end the yeshiva studies early. 29. If you're eating a meal in the sukkah and starts to rain, Yorad, then he goes down back home. In other words, he leaves his sukkah, which is on the roof, on the aliyah, and he goes down into the house. We do not force this person to go back upstairs into the sukkah in case the rain were to stop until after this meal is over. In other words, you made a good faith effort to eat in the sukkah, it began raining, you go in the house, you keep eating, the rain stops, you can finish your meal inside. The next meal you'll go back outside. Lamed 30. Yavesh pasuk neshen hadar. The Gemara says that if you have arba minim, the 4 species, lulav, etrog, hadas, and arava, and your 4 species are dried out, it is pasul, it is invalid. You cannot fulfill the mitzvah with dried out dalad minim. Why? Because it doesn't have hadar. It's not beautiful. Gazul, if it's stolen, pasul, it's also invalid. Mishum to have the mitzvah ba'avera, because it is a mitzvah which comes about by dint of a sin. You stole the item to do the mitzvah ba'avera, no good. Lamed Aleph, 31. Tanya, arbat minim shebelulav. The 4 species of the lulav, just as you cannot decrease the number, it has to be 4 and not 3, so too you cannot increase the number to make it 5. Lo matzah etrog. What if you don't find an etrog? You know, etrog is hard to come by. They only grow in certain parts of the world. They don't grow in America here. So let's say you don't find one. Don't bring a quince, don't bring a pomegranate, don't bring anything else. In other words, don't use a substitute for the real thing, for the real etrog. A faux version, a fake version of the mitzvah is not to be done. Either the real thing or not at all. What's the problem with a fake version of the mitzvah? The answer is very simple. People won't realize that it's a fake version. And in subsequent years, they'll think that what we did last year, we should do again. And all of a sudden, the proper method for observing the mitzvah is gone. And an incorrect method has now been entrenched. So we don't bring fake ceremonies in Judaism. Everyone have a great week.